Hey there internet, welcome to Roo's Horror Corner. Hokey name, I know, I may come up with something better later. The spookiest season of them all, Halloween, has just passed, but if you're like me, you just simply don't want it to end. For that reason, I decided to extend Halloween by taking a look at horror movies every Sunday. That's right, we're doing movie reviews. I compiled a list of the highest and lowest ranked horror movies, and thanks to a really complicated algorithm, I got to watch the 2014 Australian horror movie, The Babadook. What rating will I give it on the scary to shitty scale? Well, first we have to talk about the movie to find out. Let's do this. The Babadook opens with a car crash and the introduction of our main character, Amelia Vanek, played by Australian actress Essie Davis. After losing her husband Oscar in said car crash, Amelia has to balance her life between working at a nursing home and taking care of a 6-year-old son Samuel. As the movie subtly tells us, Samuel is quite a handful.
Please don't!
Nothing in my hands, nothing in my hands.
His obsession for weapons and magic aside, things seem troubled as Amelia can't even stand being touched by him. It later turns out that her husband died while taking her to the hospital to give birth to Samuel. Maybe there is a guilt thing going on. So far we got a grief-stricken widow and a behavioral creative little kid. Oh, and let's not forget about Bugsy, the family dog. For the sake of my sanity, I hope nothing happens to the little fluffer. Our initial incident happens as Samuel brings a weapon to school, causing Amelia to take him out of it and forcing her to balance her work and parenting duties. One night during story time, the family finds a strange book, the Babadook. Starting out tame, the book quickly takes a dark turn.
This is what he wears on top. He's funny, don't you think? See him in your room at night.
Mum, does it hurt the boy?
How sweet were they, son? Telling of the happiness and loveliness that lay at the bottom of...
At this point, Samuel becomes obsessed with the creature in the book, fearing it will come after him and his mother. Not caring much for Samuel's fears, Amelia is busy longing for her late husband and romantic relations.
Nice.
Affected by Samuel keeping her up most nights, Amelia starts to snap at the people at work.
Anyone got 5 billion?
And even the seemingly good relation between her and her sister Claire begins to crumble.
I want to know how you are.
You don't come around to our house anymore?
Because I can't stand being around your son.
We find out that Amelia keeps all her late husband's things in the basement, and things really start to get weird as she finds pieces of glass in her food. Oh, now the little shit really did it.
Do you think this is funny?
Do you wanna die?
Not keeping up with the Babadook nonsense, Amelia destroys the book and throws it out. We move on to Amelia's niece's birthday party. I think it's a birthday party. For some reason everyone is dressed in black. Even the clown. Amelia's declining mental state is further highlighted by her snapping at her sister and her friends.
I do volunteer work with some disadvantaged women, and a few of them have lost their husbands and they find it very hard.
That's a real tragedy. Not having time to go to the gym anymore. How do you cope?
Be 7 years. Isn't it time you moved on?
I have moved on. I don't mention him. I don't talk about him.
Well, if you don't want to be reminded of your husband, you should take off your wedding band. There isn't much time to think about it, as this happens.
Well, Dad died, so he didn't have to be with you. That's not true! And your mom doesn't want you. No.
Finish her! Fatality.
Oh, would you look at that? We arrived at the movie's most famous scene.
Just be normal! There is no Babadook!
That's not all. Samuel suddenly has a seizure, and together with his doctor, Amelia decides to simply drug the little bastard to get a good night of sleep. At first everything seems alright again, until the Babadook book reappears at the house. There are even more pages in it now, depicting Amelia killing Bugsy and Samuel. But that's not all. Prepare for the first spook of the movie. Convinced that there is a stalker after her, Amelia destroys the book and goes to the police. As it is the case in every horror movie, the police is utterly useless.
Somebody sent me a children's book.
Totally stressed out, Amelia even snaps at her elderly neighbor Mrs. Roach. And this is where the movie picks up the pace. Amelia starts to see the Babadook herself. It starts to affect her work, and she even gets into a fender bender. Yeah, that's a great example for you kids. Just hit and run. Well, now it's time to get into spoiler territory. If you want to see the movie yourself, jump to this time code to get my overall rating. If not, let's talk about the ending of the movie. After his mother took a full clothed bath, even Samuel recognizes that something is really off. He tricks Amelia into thinking that he took his meds, and while she is sleeping, he tries to call Mrs. Roach for help. Instead, Amelia simply cuts the phone line and locks down the house. That's always a good idea in a horror movie. After forcing Samuel and herself to stay awake, Amelia finally falls asleep to dream of a dead husband. Ghost hubby has no good intentions though. He offers to return to Amelia if she brings him Samuel.
You just need to bring me the boy.
Ah yes, good old infanticide. Not fooled by this, Amelia declines the offer and is possessed by the Babadook instead. The first thing on her agenda is something we all saw coming. Press F for Bugsy. Now with a newly acquired taste for blood, Baba-Amelia goes after Samuel.
I just want you to be happy.
I just want you to be happy. Sometimes I just want to smash your head against a brick wall until your fucking brains pop out.
My mom told me that every day. I see nothing wrong with that. Samuel somehow manages to overpower his mother and ties her up in the basement. Again, a normal day in Austria. He pleads with his mother, but she still wants to kill him. Thanks to Samuel's unconditionally love, they are able to drive out the Babadook. There is only one problem.
You can't get rid of the Babadook.
So here's a question. How do you weaken the Babadook?
If you touch my son again, I'll fucking kill you!
You scream at him. Of course. The creature retreats into the basement, and we see that Amelia and Samuel got out of this whole ordeal relatively unscathed as we jump ahead a couple of days. Samuel is going back to school, Amelia is supportive of his obsession with weapons and magic now, and the little guy is having a birthday party for the first time. Of course they have to remind us that Bugsy bit the dust. You didn't deserve that, Fluffer. You were one of the bestest boys. Well, that sums up the Babadook. To say this movie is more on the psychological side is an understatement. It tackles the themes of loss and grief, and how grief is something you can't just overcome and be done with. You can't just lock it away in a basement, like Amelia did. Maybe the Babadook is a Pennywise-like supernatural being singling out grieving people. Maybe everything we saw just happened during a psychotic break. We rely on Amelia as a narrator, and she's the only one able to see the Babadook. There is this line.
Am I ever gonna see it?
One day, when you're bigger.
maybe she means he can only understand and see the Babadook once he experienced grief himself, like an even creepier version of a Thestral. There's also the Babadook's children book itself. Why a book? The answer could be this.
I wrote some articles for some magazines, did some kids stuff.
Coincidence? Maybe. Did she create the book to cope with the loss of her husband? Or to have an excuse for her behavior? Maybe. Am I pulling this out of my ass? Maybe. The movie isn't clear on the existence of the Babadook. All we know is that Amelia and Samuel didn't defeat him, as we see it in the ending. The Babadook is still hanging out in the basement because Amelia is keeping it as a pet now. Or maybe this should further reinforce the idea that you can't simply get rid of your grief. It's something you have to face every day. So before we leave spoiler country, I want to get one thing off my chest. This right here just pisses me off. A tip for you horror movie makers out there: don't do this. Don't just kill an animal in a movie to get an emotional reaction out of your audience. It's cheap and lazy, and I hate it. Well, that takes care of the Babadook story elements. Welcome back to everyone who wanted to avoid spoilers. Now let's get to my personal rating. The positives first. The movie's story really surprised me. Going from the trailer, I was thinking I'd have to deal with another generic monster movie like The Bye-Bye Man or Smiley. I was expecting a psychological horror piece. We don't get to see the Babadook all the time, but when he shows up, he leaves an impact. It's less about the monster, more about the characters. The themes of loss and grief hit deep with me. I'm sure all of us had to deal with the loss of a loved one, allowing us to further identify with our main character. The acting in the movie is pretty good. It's not like I'm an authority on that. Essie Davis shows off she's capable of a wider range of emotion, and Samuel Snow Wiseman really made me hate the character in the first part of the movie before turning the tables on me.
Eat shit!
And of course, let's not forget the big player of the movie, Hachi the dog. I'm not a big technique and editing guy when it comes to movies, but there are some neat transitions I really enjoyed. As we come to the negatives, there's really only one thing I really hated, and that is something that happens to a major character during the climax of the movie. Let's keep it at that. Altogether, I declare the Babadook to be scary. If you're looking for a psychological art horror movie, this is the right movie for you. If you want to watch something with a group of friends, with a lot of gore and silly monsters, you'd better look for something else. And that's it for today. Leave your thoughts about the Babadook in the comments down below. I would love to have a chat. Until next time, bye bye!